Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Gary Lane. Today, inflation and the economy, the biggest political issues right now for this year's elections. The Republicans have the edge there, and Democrats are focusing elsewhere on abortion. Another major problem for American families, a shortage of baby formula. We'll tell you what's behind it. Plus, the mystery of long COVID, the effects it still has on people who contracted the disease months or even years ago.
The general population doesn't see how bad COVID really affects people because they're like, oh, it's nothing but a cold. It's nothing but a cold. And it's like, well, I just lost 2 years of my life from being sick from it.
We'll look at a new study that's trying to find out what the future holds for people suffering from this disease. And it's a new family-friendly film coming this Friday. It's called Family Camp, dealing with two seemingly polar opposite families.
We live in this fallen world and things are really heavy, and in particular right now they are really heavy. And so to be able to laugh, I mean, that's one of the joys that God gave us.
We'll bring you our Studio 5 conversation with some of the stars of this family-oriented film. Those stories and more today on CBN NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
We begin today with the major economic and social issues facing the country as both parties prepare for this year's midterm elections. Inflation and the economy are the biggest concerns for Americans, and Republicans have the advantage on those issues. Meanwhile, Democrats are focusing on abortion, planning a vote to codify abortion into federal law. Heather Sells brings us this look at how both parties are getting ready for the battle at the ballot box.
The president sees inflation as his top domestic priority, and for good reason. Both parties believe it will be the voters' #1 issue come November's election.
I know you got to be frustrated. I know. I can taste it.
Biden's not taking the blame, though. Instead, he's pointing the finger at supply chain problems, the war in Ukraine, and the GOP.
They don't want to solve inflation by lowering your costs. They want to solve it by raising your taxes and lowering your income.
And some Democratic voters say the president is not to blame.
Because of the whole world scene and the global pandemic that we experienced, there's little that could be done. I don't care what party was in the office.
Still, a new CNN poll spells out the president's troubles. It shows the public views this current economy as the worst in a decade. And a majority of U.S. adults say Biden's policies have hurt the economy. Midterm elections historically have served as a referendum on a president's performance. Biden hopes to avoid that by contrasting his policies with the GOP's. On Tuesday, he said he's reducing the deficit and working to make the wealthy and corporations pay more. And he pointed to a proposal by Florida Senator Rick Scott saying that Republicans want to raise taxes on families and end Social Security.
The other path is the Ultra MAGA plan.
Biden is also trying out new branding for Republicans, calling them MAGA or Ultra MAGA.
And I think what has struck him is how extreme some of the policies and proposals are that a certain wing of the Republican Party that is taking up too much of the Republican Party are for and are advocating for.
After last week's leak of a Supreme Court draft opinion on abortion suggesting it might overturn Roe v. Wade, it is clear abortion will be a big issue for some voters this year.
I think that most of our people will be voting based on values and worldview issues maybe even more than economic issues, although I think they're all tied together.
But which side will galvanize more, those who support or oppose abortion? On Tuesday, outgoing Press Secretary Jen Psaki may have bungled her messaging on protests outside conservative justices' homes.
I know that there's an outrage right now, I guess, about protests that have been peaceful to date, and we certainly continue to encourage that outside of judges' homes, and that's the president's position.
Conservatives quickly pushed back.
The Supreme Court is one thing, absolutely, go there and state your opinions on either side of the issue, but people's homes adds a level of implicit threat that I think is inappropriate.
Senate Democrats are pushing for a vote on a bill to provide federal protection for abortion rights. It is not expected to pass. And many top Dems are saying privately that the economy, not abortion, is what will move voters this year. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Parents across the U.S. are scrambling to find baby formula because supply disruptions and a massive safety recall has swept many leading brands off store shelves. Months of spot shortages at pharmacies and supermarkets have been exacerbated by the recall at Abbott. It was forced to shutter its largest U.S. formula manufacturing plant in February due to contamination concerns. For now, pediatricians and health workers are urging parents who can't find formula to contact food banks or doctors' offices. They warn against watering down formula to stretch supplies or using online do-it-yourself recipes. For babies who aren't being breastfed, formula has to have all of a baby's nutrition and has to be properly prepared so it's safe for the smallest babies. A developing food crisis around the world is spiraling into catastrophe. The war in Ukraine has global leaders racing to prevent a famine from spreading to countries around the world. International officials met recently to discuss how to take on this growing problem. CBN Capitol Hill correspondent Matt Galka reports.
Ukraine is known as the world's breadbasket because it supplies so much grain to multiple countries. But those wheat fields feeding millions of people have since been cut off from global regular supply, leaving a potential food crisis for millions looming.
I wish we were meeting under different circumstances, but the reality is that we're facing rising global food insecurity.
Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen kicked off these high-level meetings by focusing on the dangerous ripple effect of the Russian war on Ukraine. Yellen told her global economic counterparts that Russia is to blame for exacerbating a widespread food crisis.
This threat touches the most vulnerable people the hardest, families that are already spending disproportionate amounts of their income on food. Moreover, the interconnectedness of the global food system means that people on every continent are impacted.
Yellen pointed out that before the war began, some 800 million people lived in areas suffering from a shortage of food. Ukraine and Russia produce almost 15% of the world's wheat supply. Impoverished countries throughout the Middle East and Africa rely on wheat fields now cut off from the global supply chain, either by fighting or by blistering sanctions. The U.S. and its allies are working to prevent potentially millions of people from starving due to rising costs worldwide.
In the developing world, a typical family of a poor family spends as much as 2/3 of their income on food. And our estimates show that for each 1% increase in the food prices, 10 million people may be thrown into extreme poverty.
The war is hitting Lebanon hard, where Christian aid groups like Heart for Lebanon are trying to keep up with demand. About half of all Lebanese children are in need of assistance.
Lebanon counts on 87% of its grain and wheat from Ukraine. After the Port of Beirut explosion on August 4th, 2020, which totally destroyed the grain silos in Lebanon, we've been living off on a 1-month supply. And now when you have a war like you do in Ukraine, it's becoming very, very hard to get.
Matt Galka, CBN News.
In the Middle East, the Palestinian Authority is accusing Israel of killing a female journalist who was a U.S. citizen born in Jerusalem. She was killed during an Israeli counterterrorism raid today in the Palestinian city of Jenin. Shireen Abu Akleh was a well-known Palestinian reporter for the Arabic-language Al Jazeera channel. Abu Akleh was rushed to a Palestinian hospital, and she died there. Israel asked for a joint investigation, but the Palestinian Authority has refused to cooperate. Israel produced video, it says, shows that it was more likely Palestinian gunmen who killed Abu Akleh during that firefight. The incident comes against the backdrop of a surge in terror attacks over the last 2 months, where 19 Israelis have been murdered. Many of the terrorists have come from Jenin. Well, coming up, what is long COVID? Many people who had the disease months or even years ago still have symptoms, some of them severe. Now a new study is trying to find some answers about this disease. We'll tell you about it when we come back. COVID cases are on the rise in parts of the U.S., but with a surge in severe illnesses. Meanwhile, some who contracted the virus months or even years ago still face the lingering effects of that disease with a phenomenon dubbed long COVID. CBN's Brody Carter reports on a new study designed to help research what the future holds for those still suffering with symptoms.
I actually tested positive for COVID twice. The first time was in November of 2020. Headaches, fatigue, tachycardia, shortness of breath, GI issues. I had hair loss, tinnitus, just ringing in my ears, activity intolerance, insomnia. I have a cardiologist, an electrophysiologist, a pulmonologist. I have 2 different neurologists, 20-some, I think it was like 26 pills a day.
COVID-19 turned the world upside down for more than 2 years. The fortunate ones survived and healed. But for Alyssa Rubel, an ICU nurse in Grand Rapids, Michigan, her COVID symptoms never went away.
The general population doesn't see how bad COVID really affects people because they're like, oh, it's nothing but a cold. It's nothing but a cold. And it's like, well, I just lost 2 years of my life from being sick from it.
Despite naysayers and those who doubt long COVID, Alyssa was debilitated, forced to take off almost a full year from work.
Long COVID is real, and even if we don't have a blood test for it, there are definitely people who had COVID in March of 2020 who are still sick. So some people are having symptoms for, at least a couple of years.
The CDC estimates 1 in 3 people who get COVID suffer from long-term symptoms. Leora Horowitz, a professor at NYU School of Medicine, says it's hard to track long COVID cases due to a broad list of symptoms that could follow after a fight with COVID.
Some people are having trouble concentrating, trouble thinking. They call it brain fog. Some people are having fatigue and exhaustion. They could have scarring in their lungs forever. The risk of things like heart attack or stroke or kidney failure or diabetes is increased after people have COVID, even if they recover completely and they don't have these other symptoms.
Congress approved $1.5 billion for the National Institutes of Health to research the cause, prevention, and hopefully find a treatment for long COVID patients.
It's called Recover, and the website is recovercovid.org.
And you're being asked to sign up on the website to participate in a critical study. Regardless if you've had COVID or not, researchers need data from as many people as possible to find answers for people like Alyssa.
Finally something after 2 years of just, we don't know anything. The fact that there's this massive budget to actually do something, and hopefully we can get some answers.
Brody Carter, CBN News.
Still ahead, a look at a new family-friendly film coming this Friday. It's called Family Camp, and CBN Studio 5 talks to some of its stars. We'll hear from them right after this. A new family-friendly movie, Family Camp, hits theaters Friday. The film stars Tommy Woodard and Eddie James. Together, they're the comedy duo The Skit Guys. Their first feature film has 2 seemingly polar opposite families assigned to share the same cabin for a hilariously eventful week at a church camp. CBN Studio 5 traveled to Nashville, Tennessee for the film's premiere.
We started off by performing skits for our youth group, then other churches. Eventually, we had the opportunity to perform for audiences around the world.
How do we go from skits to a feature film? Good question. Only God, right?
Family Camp is the highlight of our year.
You can see how short-sighted we were to call ourselves skit guys. To go, well, we'll just always do skits, But God had a bigger plan in mind. It was the greatest dream we always wanted.
Very humbling, very okay. Luke 12:48, too much is given, much is expected. You feel that weight. Or what Spider-Man's uncle said, with great power comes great responsibility.
You ask our family, it's the greatest place on earth.
I'm sorry, I was late. I think it's always been built into me to want to make people laugh, to see them smile.
What do I gotta do to make it up to you?
How about we go to that camp?
In Family Camp, you are who?
I play Grace Ackerman, and I'm the mom that kind of gets this ball rolling to get my entire family to go to family camp.
Church camp?
She kind of walked this line of wanting this life for her family and this Christian path, but then having her family be in, the real world. We all walk that line. I guess what I'm saying is she's probably the most normal, down-to-earth character I've ever played, which is one of the things I was really drawn to about her, yes.
Welcome to camp.
Were the Ackermans?
Don't seem to have an Ackerman here on the list.
You made the final payment online, right?
Hmm?
My character is Tommy Ackerman. He gets conned by his wife into going to this family camp that he doesn't want to go to.
This is glamping.
What? No Wi-Fi. I can't wait until you realize there's no air conditioning. What?
My character is that guy at church that is the first guy to go, hey, where's the gang going for lunch? And you're like, oh, he's not part of our gang. You know what?
Now, where's my yummy bride?
Oh, honey.
Victoria is this woman who wants her family to be perfect, wants to do all the right things for all the right reasons, but she's struggling. And I think a lot of women today have that same feeling where it just feels like we're supposed to have this perfect life. We're supposed to have this Instagram ready, perfect cookie cutter family. And that's not reality.
Hello, York family. Oh, I'm Grace.
Stop, not another word.
Oh.
Tell me about the dynamics of these two families.
You have the Ackermans who are struggling in their own family to have connection, I think, is their main issue.
Here's my card.
Intergalactic chiropractic.
And then you have this other family, the Sanders, who want to pretend that it's all about connection.
Buckle up, everybody.
Them coming together is really, really fun, first of all, but also I think that they teach each other really sweet lessons.
The Camp Catawba Trophy, you should see this baby on my mantle at home. The family that takes home the most points at the end of the week takes the cup from my cold, dead hands.
If you think we're going to be friends with that guy, you need your head examined.
What made you say, I want to sign on and do this?
Well, when I read it, the first thing that hit me was that, everybody can see this. It's showing these people's journey. And then it was funny.
We are gonna do the buddy system. Let's go, bucko.
Should have known better than to trust you.
What lessons does a comedy teach people?
Oh, I think laughing at ourselves is amazing and fun, and I love that because when you get people laughing, you get them to kind of relax, and then their hearts are open to that truth bomb.
You have no idea where we are. Come on, this is our story.
I think that comedy just has a way of lightening the load in life. I mean, we live in this fallen world and things are really heavy, and in particular right now they are really heavy. And so to be able to laugh, I mean, that's one of the joys that God gave us, is laughter.
Get that thing away from me! My skin is on fire!
Oh, sounds like my kind of party.
There's gonna be humor, there's gonna be heart, there's gonna be things that tug at your heartstrings, maybe tear up a little bit. We're like, are you crying? No, I'm not crying.
We have a problem.
Our husbands are out there on their own, and we don't even know where they are.
As this is released to the world, do you have a hope, a prayer, or desire for the project?
Yeah, I do have a hope and a prayer. My hope is that comedy in Christian films will bring more people to the table.
It's okay, mi amigo. When God closes a door, he opens a Chick-fil-A.
There has to be a lot in there to where people leave going, not Christianese, going, well, that was sweet, that was nice. Well, God bless them and their little movie. It has to be, that was funny.
Yeah.
Why is comedy important in Christian film?
Laughter breaks down walls for truth to enter.
Yeah.
So if you can get someone to laugh, they'll listen to you, but you have to have something good to say.
I thought my family would just magically become the family that I've always wanted them to be.
And hopefully it opens conversations for families to have connection.
Things get a little more complicated when you get a peek behind the curtain.
Families need to do things together. See, life can pull you in many different directions if you let it. But real talk, it's pretty easy to get lost if you don't have a guide.
My big hope for the movie is that it does so well we get a sequel, because I want to make another movie with these guys.
That was fun.
That was something.
You're welcome.
For more entertainment stories, tune in to Studio 5 tonight at 8:30 Eastern on the CBN News Channel or anytime on the CBN News app. Well, coming up, an Israeli group has given a life-saving heart treatment to a little girl from Ukraine. We'll bring you their story when we come back. Stay with us. An Israeli group known for treating children with heart defects is helping a little girl from Ukraine to live free from heart disease. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl brings us that story from Jerusalem.
5-year-old Ukrainian Karina Andreyko just received life-saving heart treatment in Israel.
Karina was born with a defect inside her heart,
between the two atriums. And this defect makes a lot of blood to shunt from the left side of the heart to the right and makes the right side of the heart big.
Her mom, Irina Andrejko, sought help from Israel's field hospital just 3 miles from their home near the Polish border. There, doctors diagnosed Karina with a congenital defect treatable with a procedure available in Israel, but not in Ukraine. That's when Save a Child's Heart stepped in.
We immediately said that we'll be happy to help, and a very fast operation began to start the logistics of bringing the girl from a war zone to Israel, issuing passports, entry permits, vaccinations, examinations, and within 2 weeks she was brought to Israel.
Based at the Wolfson Medical Center in Holon, Israel, Save a Child's Heart has saved the lives of more than 5,000 children from 59 countries since it started more than 25 years ago.
For us at Save a Child's Heart, it doesn't matter where the child comes from. It could be a Ukrainian child, it could be a child from Gaza, it could be a child from Iraq, from Syria, from Africa. We are here to help them and to save their lives.
According to Tamar Shapira from Save a Child's Heart, Karina has a twin back in Ukraine, and the family lives in an area heavily damaged by the war.
Mother's not working, the girls are not going to kindergarten, the father was recruited to fight with the forces of Ukraine, and their condition is very bad.
We are a country that underwent many wars, and we are also raising our children in a war zone, in essence. So although we can relate to her anxiousness and stress because we know how she feels. We had missiles thrown on my house and my children like she had on hers, so we understand her. And my grandparents were refugees from Europe, so we can relate. But again, I think we are lucky, and we felt that we need to help her all we can.
I am happy that I came to Israel for my child to have an operation here. On the one hand, I'm very worried about her, but I think everything will be fine.
Doctors say Karina's prognosis is good, and she should have a completely normal life. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, that's it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel anytime or online with CBNNews.com. Also, tell us what you think about the stories you've seen by emailing newswatch@cbn.com. Talk to us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Join us next time and have a great day. Be blessed.